Hi, everyone. Okay, so this is less of a lecture, but still has some information that would be helpful for you getting your quiz done for this unit or whatever. And it's more of an introduction to the movie that I want you to watch for this week. And full disclosure, the first time that I assigned this movie, or we watched it in class because it was an in-person class, I got the sense that there were a handful of students that absolutely loved it, but most of them like hated it. That's my review. But the reason I'm bringing that up is because the next time that I taught the movie, I did, I think, a better job of sort of like contextualizing it. And then I got a distinctly different impression that students were able to maybe not enjoy it more, but definitely appreciate it more, which, as you know, that is the name of the game of this class. So I'm going to do my best to sort of explain to you why this movie is amazing, particularly given what we're doing in this module, which is talking about narrative, and specifically narrative uh, in motion pictures, narratives, screenplay writing, and adaptions for the screen and things like that. So just a reminder, this is from the last little mini lecture I gave you. There is sort of like this formula for film storytelling. Now, as I mentioned, and me and of course the narrative expert lady who you watched in the supplemental video, even though there's this formula of the three act structure, there's lots of ways to approach that. But at the end of the day, most film storytelling is gonna have the same basic pattern. You have the protagonist, you learn about what's going on with them, then they go through a bunch of stuff, there's character transformation, and at the end there's some sort of exciting conclusion, and maybe that's when the transformation happens, whatever. Point is, you could look at that, which is fair, as being a little cliche, a little formulaic in itself, even if people do it differently. And adaptation is kind of making that sort of commentary. Okay. So the movie you're going to be watching is about a screenplay writer who's really struggling with that. He wants to get away from the conventions of storytelling and storytelling for the screen, I should say, because um, he's trying to adapt a novel. And you could argue that when you don't have to worry about how something is presented in, a 2 hour little segment, you have a little bit more flexibility. In fact, we might talk about that a little bit later when we talk about the difference between TV and filmmaking. But he's struggling because he wants to adapt this novel, and he doesn't want to turn it into this sort of like conventional uh, narrative that we often see in screenplays. Anyway, so sorry, there's a cat here, but my leg is falling asleep, so the cat's gonna have to go somewhere else. Um, so basically, what adaptation the movie's doing is messing around with this idea of, what would happen if we messed around with the idea of a traditional narrative. And I kind of, my comment right there was sort of symmetrical and repetitive for a reason, because what this film is about, it's a screenplay about a screenplay writer who is trying to disrupt the narrative. But in doing so, the narrative that you're watching is also sort of disruptive. I'm going to try to explain this in different ways, so keep bearing with me. Um, it's tackling these issues though about like, well, maybe we don't need all stories to be adapted for a motion picture if they're going to follow the same sort of like narrative formula. He's trying to write a book about flowers, which is a little bit of an oversimplification. But you could write a book about, somebody's experience with flowers, and it doesn't necessarily have to follow that structure. And he's struggling with like, okay, this was a great book. How do I now make it in film without being sort of cliche? What's really interesting about this movie, well, there's a lot of things. It is based on real events. So, loosely, there was a best-selling novel called The Orchid Thief, written by a real person that won a bunch of awards. It was written by a real person about a real person. Charlie Kaufman is a real screenplay writer who had done some really great work on a movie called Being John Malkovich, which I loved, but it might also kind of be like whoosh. He also, if you've seen Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, he worked on that with Spike Jonze. He has, and actually he may have done that after this movie. Forgive me, but you're gonna watch some supplemental films about him. He was very revolutionary in the early 2000s for the things that he was doing with story. And what he did was he wanted to adapt this book and he couldn't figure out how to do it. So essentially, he ended up writing a screenplay about his own efforts to adapt this book into a screenplay. Are you kind of starting to see it now? Okay, just keep bearing with me. So it is sort of based in reality because, yes, he wasn't sure how to actually write the screenplay. And then he ended up writing the screenplay about him being unsure about how to write the screenplay, how to do the adaptation. But it's only based on real events because there's a lot of things that are not true. For instance, Nicolas Cage plays Charlie Kaufman, the screenplay writer in the movie. He also plays Charlie Kaufman's twin brother. And no, Charlie Kaufman does not have a twin brother in real life. But one of the things I want you to think about is why did Charlie Kaufman make himself a fake twin brother when he was writing a screenplay about himself? Um, we covered the three act structure, and sort of the irony of this movie is he Charlie Kaufman, the Nicolas Cage character and the screenplay writer, is struggling with trying to escape conventions. But if you actually take a step back after you see this movie, you'll see that it also follows the three act structure. Even though he's sort of wrestling with it, so you're going to have a setup. But the thing is it's going to be cross-cut. Remember what cross-cutting means, where you're kind of there's going to be two stories that are sort of woven throughout this movie. You're going to have the screenplay writer struggling with how to adapt the book, and then what you're going to be seeing is, and yes, Meryl Streep and oh gosh, I can't think of his name now. I'm embarrassed. Phenomenal actor. Ah, Chris Cooper. They are in this other story that is supposed to be the adaptation that he's writing. So you're kind of seeing the story that he's trying to write or he is writing, and his struggles to do it. But of course, outside of it all, there is a real Charlie Kaufman that actually wrote all this. So you get to know both of those, and they're going, by the way, I'm so sorry. I've got like this, you see there's a little pug in the background here. That is the saliva e noises that you hear. I apologize, but it's keeping her busy, and so we're grateful. Um, Oh, now the other pug is coming. So sorry about all this. In the midpoint, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because it's going to be important to sort of like follow the meaning of the film. Um, there is a lot of like struggle that you see, but at some point towards the end of the midpoint, what you're going to see is both of the different narratives that you're going to see, the characters are going to make a dramatic sort of there's going to be a turn of events. There's going to be a change in things such that when you get to act three, things are going to feel very, very different. And the reason it feels different, it might even, this is where my students were like, well, what the hell did I just watch? But there's meaning in that. Because it's all about sort of should we try to be unconventional or should we try to be conventional? And I think without giving too much away, you'll see that something changes where things become very conventional towards the end. So I want you to think about, here's a baby. So I want you to think about what does that mean? What do these shifts say? What's the movie trying to say about whether or not we should adhere to these narrative conventions or not? One of the jokes in the film, remember I said things are like based on real life, is that there's a very, very famous um, expert in screenplay writing, McKee, who is a real person, but again, he's represented by somebody else. You know this actor, I can't remember his name at the time, but he's the guy. Anybody watch Succession? Anyone? It's brilliant. Chef's kiss. I love it. Um, and if you watch the interactions with him, he's kind of giving all of this sort of like classic film advice about how to write things, kind of like that KM Weiland person you watched. And at some point, he even says like, he's giving advice on how to write a screenplay, and he says, whatever you do, don't write in a Deus ex machina. And basically, that's sort of this cliche way that a lot of movies will just sort of like um, save the protagonist by some sort of act of God or some sort of like unlikely event. And it's the type of thing that you walk out of a movie theater going like, ah, that was unrealistic, or that was too like um it was it's sort of cheesy. It's sort of like a shortcut for storytelling. And so what you'll see here in adaptation is like that's exactly what happens, and he himself is functioning as that sort of unbelievable ending. And all of this is about, again, the reason it's kind of hard to explain, but also the reason why I hope that you'll be able to appreciate it is this is a classic example, but probably like the most classic example of meta cinema. It's and there was a lot of this in the early 2000s, but it's a film about film, but it's worse than that, right? It's a film about um it's a screenplay about writing a screenplay about writing a screenplay, you know. It is making sort of commentary on itself. It's very self-referential. And the more that you can sort of appreciate all of the I'm putting quotes around jokes that the film is doing about not just Hollywood, but itself, the more I think you'll understand why it's considered like to be such a brilliant film, specifically a brilliant work of storytelling. It's storytelling about storytelling, right? It's very, very meta. Um, and the other things, I'll just, sort of leave you with these like questions if you, because it'll get you thinking for some of the quiz questions and things like that. But if you clicked on this, it's going to send you to one of the supplemental videos I'm going to have you watch this week. One of them is about Charlie Kaufman, and it'll reference some of his other films so that you can see that um, a lot of what he's trying to do is question these conventions in Hollywood broadly. And it's not just with this film, but it's with some of his other work too. So that I'll give you a little bit more context. And then the other video that I have assigned, you might want to wait until after. Oh, there goes the cuckoo clock. You might want to wait until after you see the film, do what you want to do. It's going to directly address what the theme of this movie is. And I hope that is meaningful for you. Again, even if you hated the movie, I hope you can understand why it's so smart. And that will set us up for when we start talking about symbolism and themes, which is going to be in the next lecture or two. So, okay, I hope you enjoy it or at least appreciate it. Bye.